Hey guys, and welcome once again to Ahead of the Curve, brought to you by Bybit. My name is Francesca. You can call me Fran. And today I'm very excited to be joined by experts in the NFT space. Before we jump in, a quick note to our viewers out there. If you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, comments, just drop them into the Q&A box below. We've got lots to talk about, but I promise we will dedicate a good amount of time to address some of your burning questions. Wait no more. Let's bring in our first guest for today. We have Louisa Cho, research analyst at Nansen. Louisa, how are you today?
Hi, good. I'm really excited to be part of this discussion.
Nice. And how about Leonard? We also have just hang right there, Luisa. We also have our gaming guru in the house, Leonard Wee, project lead at Epic Meta. Good day to you, Leonard. I'd love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better as well. So why don't we start with a good old story about how you guys started your NFT journey, right? Both on a personal note as well as from a project launch point of view. Leonard, let's start with this with you, along with an introduction about yourself.
Very happy to be here today, Francesca, and nice to meet you too, Louisa. Personally, I've been in the or rather, I have been in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space since 2017. Started off just in community management. Then I moved on to a firm that does technical development services for blockchain companies, and eventually ended up in a public relations and investor relations firm. So personally, have been kind of like in the ICO like gig back then. Very different market today. Things have changed a lot since then. And after that, NFTs was actually something that kind of really caught my attention only in the beginning of last year, when me and a couple of my friends started dabbling into NBA Top Shot. So that was a pretty novel idea at that point of time, and it was quite fun to trade and participate in all the pack drops when it first came out. So that was our first experience, waiting all the way up until like 4 a.m. for like a NFT booster pack. So after which we thought that, it would be cool if we were able to do something along the same lines for the esports industry. And that's how we kind of got started with the project of Epic Meta actually.
Cool. And how about you, Louisa? How did you get your hands on your first NFT?
So I'm actually quite a late bloomer, to be honest, to the NFT space. Similar to Len, I got into sort of the crypto space first after I sort of finished my doctoral studies. To sort of get a job in academia these days, it was really challenging. And I sort of remember panicking and not knowing what to do. And then I come to learn about the blockchain space, and I got really intrigued. So I started actually writing sort of blog articles for some New Zealand cryptocurrency firms, and that's how I got my foot into the crypto industry. And then working a few years there, eventually having the opportunity to join Nansen. And I'm actually research analyst with the NFT squad. So through, I guess, learning on the job, that's where I got exposed to my first NFT piece and bought my first NFT collection. But what really sort of draw me to the space is that sense of enthusiasm that communities have, and how generous they are with knowledge, and passion they share for NFT projects.
So, Louisa, you mentioned that Nansen shares, database of wallet labels and provides real-time on-chain data dashboards to users, that kind of thing. Elaborate a little bit on that for the uninitiated. Tell us a little bit more about Nansen, what you guys do, and how really, this is useful or helpful to users out there.
Yeah, so for Nansen, I guess our at the core of what we do is really trying to surface the signals for our users. We actually have a freemium dashboard, so for users who are not paid users, they still have access to some of our key insights. So in particular, with what the NFT squad, what we do is we try to sort of provide better matrix indicators and signals for users to better navigate the space, especially for, so we sort of have, a range of users in mind in terms of personas, from people who are really affluent, crypto native, to new users. So one of the sort of key features that we recently launched is also the NFT index and also the trends dashboard. So it gives people a sort of a broad idea of what collections are involved, what's picking up momentum, and as you mentioned with the smart labels, I guess that is one of the really key unique features of Nansen. And what we do is our attribution team actually go through a lot of hard work trying to identify wallets that have actually performed well, or are actually good at what they're doing in terms of the crypto NFT space, and actually label these wallets so that for new users, you can actually look at what people are doing, the behavior aspects of what these wallets are actually transacting, and therefore hopefully be able to pick up some sort of signal to inform your own strategy.
Nice. Give us a little teaser about kind of what trends you're observing right now. What's the latest one?
So at the moment, one of the interesting thing that we found sort of in the first quarter of this year is that despite the slowdown of the broad markets, and also the broad markets in general, and also the crypto market, we still see quite a lot of strength and momentum in the NFT space. In fact, in one of our latest quarterly report, using our NFT index as a metric, we see that NFT is actually outperforming the cryptocurrency industry year to date. So that was actually quite intriguing. And what Nansen also does in our trends dashboard is we can also look at the number of new users and returning users joining to the space. So we did have the market sort of slowing down a little bit in the previous 2 months, but in the month of April, that sort of looks like it kind of rebound a little bit. But we're sort of still cautious of it may be too early to tell anything for definite in terms of where the trend is going. But these are some of the insights that Nansen provides.
Very nice. Now, Leonard, I want to shine a spotlight on you because earlier you mentioned that much of what you do at work with Epic Meta was very much, influenced or inspired by your personal experience as well, with, the NBA collection, and various other things. So talk us through, what Epic Meta does and how users out there, the uninitiated, how they can interact with your platform.
Got it. So for Epic Meta, right, when we first started off this particular project, we came up with a very definitive why, which was to give gamers an alternative method for generating revenue. And the reason for this, right, is because me and my co-founder, we have actually had quite a number of friends who entered competitive gaming in the past. So over the years, we've sort of come to understand the difficulties which many of them face during their professional career. And I would say that one of the key problems for these gamers, right, would be, in a sense, a lack of stable income when they participate in tournaments. You have to place within the top 3 before you're entitled to the prize pool. And as a result, many gamers turn to streaming to supplement their income. So with advertisement revenue, sponsorship revenue, and things like that, this kind of works out for a while, but after a prolonged period, they start to experience streamer burnout. So we took a lot of kind of inspiration, right, from all the physical traditional soccer cards that we used to collect back when we were young. And of course, from NBA Top Shot. And we realized that if we were able to apply like this new technology, blockchain technology itself isn't exactly new, but since NFTs came to the fore last year and people were more accepting of it, we felt that it was the correct market conditions for us to actually attempt to create a project of this sort and marry some new technology, in a sense, to a traditional industry that has been booming for many, many years already before we even started this. So that was kind of how we started this whole entire thing. And the point of it was to make things very seamless for all of these gamers, right? Because we understand that we are not exactly tackling people who are crypto native. And there's a lot of people in the fan base who might not be so as well. So for the gamers itself, right, when we first spoke to them and things like that, we didn't want to give them additional steps that they had to do in order to onboard for our platform. So it's very simple. The only thing we would require from them, right, would be the permission from their team and their franchises to utilize their media rights, their photos, and things like that. Then we'll collect all of these photos. We'll handle the technical side. We'll handle the design of all the esports player cards. And then we'll turn that into NFTs for them. So we'll handle the whole commercialization aspect of it, putting it into booster packs, running the NFT campaigns. On their end, what we will require from the teams itself, right, as a means of like cooperation would, of course, also for them to let their fan base know that they are right now issuing their own NFTs and that these are something that the fan base can potentially take part in for new rewards and new perks. So bearing in mind that, we also took into account like all the feedback that we collected from the teams. Some of the teams expressed that, you know, they wanted more utilities out of the NFTs because this was something that they were worried about. And this was something that me and my partners were quite worried about as well when we were collecting NBA Top Shot. Like, the idea was pretty novel, right? And it's fun to like collect and trade for a while. But after that, you kind of start figuring out like, you know, I have all of these NFTs. Like, if I'm not trading, if I'm not like selling or collecting anymore, like what do I do with them? So as a result, right, we felt that, you know, it would be great for us to actually like put some utility around these esports player cards. And I think one of the best utilities that we could think of it for this point of time would be like an esports manager game. So we're not really reinventing the wheel. We're just creating something that is repurposed for the esports industry as a whole. So I would say that on the hand of the esports teams, not really too much that they really need to do.
And how easy or difficult do you think it is to onboard someone who is totally new to the field, right? Someone who has, you know, earlier, I think Louisa, you mentioned that, you know, various data, you know, point to address different groups of users, right? The beginners and the advanced. I'm sure that for Leonard as well, many of the esports players are kind of like converting into the space. What's the trend you see there? Maybe, you know, the easiest way one can onboard and how you would recommend people address some of the biggest challenges that they face. Leonard?
I actually, it's quite funny. So on my hand, right, there's a few different viewpoints for this, right? Some of my advisors have previously remarked to me, right, that let Bitcoin do the marketing when it comes to converting people, non-crypto natives to crypto natives. Because with Bitcoin being like hitting the mainstream and getting so much attention, right, people start asking how they can start getting into the space itself. There's another group of my advisors which feel that it is very important for us to like focus on the educational aspect of things. With regards to the esports players themselves, right? Like we couldn't wait as a project for all of them to like start figuring out NFTs on their own. So it was a very, very long process of education. Trust building was something that was very important. So in a sense, I would say that our community building kind of started off from converting all the esports players into the NFT space. So after a while, right, like once these guys are sold on the idea, once these guys finally understand a little bit more about the industry itself, then they can go on to start being, in a sense, ambassadors for like the crypto industry, whereby they convert people from their own fan bases and they convert the people who are following them into crypto natives as well. But of course, that would be, I would say that means that there's kind of like two hoops for us to jump through, right? Number one, we have to like convert the key influencers first. And number two, you would kind of have to like start converting the rest of their fan base. So there is merit in some of my advisors saying that, you know, don't market to the non-crypto people, just focus on like the crypto crowd. But I think that it has to be applied to only certain industries. Like in our case specifically, right, I don't think that it works out as well because majority of the esports gamers fan base are actually not really crypto native at this point of time. So community building, honestly, is what I see as the most important aspect of things. But of course, right, like Louisa, you have a lot more data on this aspect. So I'm actually very interested to hear what thoughts you may have on this and whether we could possibly get some tips from you on how to convert the non-crypto natives.
No, definitely. I think what you mentioned, I guess in crypto, they have sort of start to see how important the network effect is when we sort of value a cryptocurrency project. I recently came across a blog piece. Actually, I believe it was by an analyst or an investment manager, actually at A16Z, and he sort of mentioned that perhaps instead of looking at network effects, sometimes with crypto, we can sort of learn it from ecology studies. And in ecology, I believe there's this concept where in order for a community or a species to sort of thrive, they need to feel safe, or they need to have some kind of condition. And like you said, that in the case of NFT, perhaps that is trust, that and I think, or some kind of common space, common infrastructure where people can feel comfortable to come together and then organically connect, share knowledge in informal ways, and then co-create new knowledge that perhaps contribute back to the project and then help that project grow, which is why if we reflect the NFT projects today and the NFT projects, what they were like perhaps even 6 months or 8 months ago, it's very different. At one point, we had a hype where if an NFT has some kind of utility, it connected to certain kind of users, the onboarding became natural. But as the whole market space sort of get more and more sophisticated, what we're seeing is new projects are actually putting more emphasis around building their ecosystem. So from the community, it branches out further, it becomes an ecosystem, their brand, and then hopefully from there generate some kind of value and future return for their users. But I agree with you, Lena, in terms of the importance of trust when it comes to community building.
Yeah, and I also want to add to that by saying that I think, Leonard, you bring up a good point about letting Bitcoin do the work, right? I think the correlation is so strong, and that many times the adoption of NFTs, cryptos, it almost has a natural force behind it that kind of has a ripple effect. People don't really have to talk about it in order for others to kind of be curious about it, right? So, whether it's pop culture or really just mainstream culture, whatever that means, right? And NFTs, they've been very much mutually dependent, with a very close relationship, whether you're talking about memes, PFPs, or even like collection of selfies. Sometimes, I guess, seemingly simple kind of art being sold for millions and millions of dollars. Why do you think people are willing to invest in them? And Louisa, I guess I'll start this question with you.
Yeah, I think there's many reasons why someone may invest into an NFT piece. When we did the index, what we actually did was we spent a lot of work actually trying to identify what are the different types of use cases, or what are the different types of categories of NFTs. And as you mentioned, Francesca, what we found was almost 2/3 was actually social NFT types, where they're dominated by profile pictures, but we also have some kind of utility, access and membership, and then we have things that as NFT that are for gaming purposes, for art purposes, for metaverse. So as the NFT space matures, what we see is that they become more diversified in terms of the use cases. So really depending on these use cases, you have different users seeing different value propositions in these projects. For example, in the case of social NFT, what we see is that it's really the community or that sense of identity or connection that they see in that project, especially in a post-COVID world where the majority of the world went into a lockdown. From a sociological aspect, isolation was it's a real, and loneliness perhaps it's a real sort of problem or circumstances that many young people have to deal with. But then through these NFT communities, they have some kind of connection where they're able to communicate, people share ideas organically on common topics. And I guess that's the beauty. Like sometimes when I'm in certain Discord group, being able to speak to someone about something totally random from the other side of the world, and being able to come back every day to add to that conversation is really interesting. You also have some of the projects where, for example, their roadmap is actually shaped by the feedback from community members or community engagement, and people feel that they have something that they're emotionally invested in, and perhaps is that those values that sometimes are not the most direct values, and the intangible one is actually what sort of draw people to certain NFT project. Of course, then you have with any kind of speculative asset or emerging asset, you have people there are just in it for the quick money. They're just there to trade, and this is something that actually our NFT smart labels can actually guide users. You'll see that we have traders, we have hodlers, we have early adopters, and then we have people who are able to identify opportunity and they're in there to sweep large amount of collection at a certain price. So really depending on, I guess, how you identify yourself, and what are your motivations, what are you trying to achieve, and depending on those, the reasons here why someone will invest in NFT really varies.
I think everything they mentioned, kind of helps, especially beginners, discover what they can do with NFTs, right? Leonard, you mentioned utility. Also, Louisa, you mentioned various other ways that someone within the space can use NFTs. Do you think there are any other uses that have not yet been implemented? And why do you think that can provide value to the market? Louisa?
Firstly, I guess the disclaimer, I don't have a tech background myself, so I have sort of a working knowledge in terms of how smart contract works. But I think there's the space. The beauty is the space is so innovative, and as we sort of go towards a more Web3 environment, you can have sometimes the simplest idea from someone with a non-tech background emerging in the NFT space. And I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity in terms of how NFT can expand further. One of the things that I'll be quite interested is, of course, with the Web3 narrative where we have more and more ownership around our NFT, our own data, how that will actually look like in terms of encapsulating that in the form of an NFT. So that is perhaps one of the possible ways. So NFT is a way to encapsulate our own personal data so that we have full ownership, we have more rights around how we want to use them. That could be one way. Another thing that perhaps I find really interesting is how do we use NFT as a sort of midpoint or intermediary to connect the online offline space? Are we able to use it perhaps to transact actual tangible assets in the offline world? That is something perhaps as we see our worlds morphing in between what's on digital and what's offline, how might that look like? So these are perhaps some area that we could explore further.
This actually sounds a lot like something that the gaming sphere could kind of bridge, right? The tangible, intangibles, the traditional legacy into the here and now. So we've seen the gaming industry really dip their toes into NFTs, and I think you can see where I'm going with this, Leonard. Do you game yourself, and what do you think might this crossover mean to you and the community at large?
Yeah, personally, I am a pretty big gamer. I used to game, for those people in the attendees who play Dota, I used to play Dota with a trackpad on my computer just so that, people wouldn't know that I'm actually gaming. Because, if you use a mouse back then, right, then it's a dead giveaway that you are gaming right in the middle of class. So we all had to kind of adapt to that situation. For me, with regards to how NFTs are actually applicable within the gaming space itself, right? I would say that we're quite lucky in a sense because gaming assets, they are very much digital already. So it makes it a lot easier for us to kind of apply this new technology towards the industry itself. For me, the thing that really captured my attention for NFTs in here would be the fact that now when we play games, we can actually earn money, like just playing casually, not that we are playing like professionally and things like that. So, and on top of that, right, like many of these in-game items that we collect and we spend so much time like leveling up and grinding in like quests and stuff like that to kind of like get, they're actually transferable to other games in the future, because these NFT assets will always remain on like the blockchain. Even if the gaming studio behind the initial game itself, right, collapses, there are other developers and there is a community in place, right, who could actually make the decision to take over the whole entire project themselves. And because, right, many of these like projects right now operate on like a DAO, so community governance and things like that, we're kind of like the centralization aspect, right, helps a lot, right, when it comes to like applying the NFTs in this. So gamers won't lose their progress insofar when it comes to like, let's say, the items that they acquired, and some of these are really rare ones. This is to me like a pain point that people who have been gaming for many years, right, can really actually get behind it. Because I played like many games in the past whereby like, I've spent many hours on it, and at the end of the day, like the game is no longer in production, no longer any more updates and things like that. People kind of move on. So in a sense, it's like time wasted. Yeah, like no money out of it, just the entertainment I got from all those hours playing those games.
Leonard, just you mentioned, the how NFTs kind of break down the barriers of, I mean, it has longevity, right? And it can break down barriers between, for example, different games. It can be cross collaborations, maybe things like that. What cross like if you zoom out a little bit, looking on the industry level, what cross industry NFT collaborations do you think you might be most excited for, right? And perhaps hope to see in the upcoming few months?
Um, I think cross industry wise, right, when it comes to the gaming, I can see gaming and entertainment actually doing very well when it comes to like cross collaborations. Um, I think in particular, right, like because there are things people do a lot of cosplay, right? So like all of the things that you wear when you're doing cosplay and stuff like that, actually many of them, I would say first they originate from like a manga, from like a comic book and things like that. But actually many of them could be applied to games. Like we could easily create NFTs of those, like of the items, of like the things that they wear, and then we like apply it within like certain games that actually fit the same genre. So those could be some like very interesting cross collaborations. And I would say those kind of collaborations will kind of be really profitable, because these are industries that focus on building a very big community around it. And this community is very willing to spend on these kind of collectibles as well as in-game items when it comes to this. So we do see a couple of examples of this with some of the games. Like for instance, like personally, I play like a lot of Mobile Legends, and we see like Mobile Legends try a lot of cross collaborations when it comes to skins and things like that with many of the entertainment industries. Like for example, like lately, I think they just recently had like a Transformers and Mobile Legends like crossover kind of thing. So I think it'd be pretty cool if we kind of see like a Transformers game able to like apply like the items that you acquire within it into like perhaps like the Mobile Legends game and stuff like that moving forward. Of course, it's going to take I mean, it's very easy to say this, right? But in actual fact, when it comes to the collaborations itself, there's a lot of legal things that we need to take into account. There's a lot of licensing issues that we need to get over. So these are kind of some of the problems that we are still trying to figure out how to bridge. I wouldn't say that we've actually gotten like a full idea of how to like bridge this gap, but we are working towards this at this point.
I'm actually curious to hear if Louisa has any insights into this from your point of view.
So just to clarify, it's the cross-industry use of NFTs.
Correct.
Yeah, I think definitely there is potential there, because if I were to sort of take it one step sort of backwards, and sort of zoom out a little bit, not talking and relating it to specific use case or context, NFT is basically a unique digital identifier, isn't it? So it's a way of how we organize, encapsulate, and verify, identify, some kind of data. So if we is as what Leonard mentioned, if we can use NFT in entertainment, NFT in sports, from there NFT in healthcare, it really just depends on, I guess, whether or not. I think the question perhaps might be more useful is it's not just how we use it in cross industry, but rather if we were to use it, does it actually make a tangible difference, or are we just using it for the sake of using it, or to sort of apply this technology for the sake of applying it. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leonard, here, and that's perhaps one of the heated debate in gaming at the moment, is that some gamers actually feel that yes, it's, with all the, integrating NFT perhaps actually improve the gaming experience, but there's also traditional gamer that say no, they're actually quite happy where gaming can be innovated on blockchain, but perhaps there isn't quite a place for NFT. So I really think it depends on the context, how it's executed. So yeah, that's my my sort of thought.
Very interesting thoughts there. I think when we talk about the entertainment industry, right, several celebrities or even political leaders, if I may say so, are supporting, in fact, public supporters of NFTs. What do you think this means for the ecosystem to have support from high-profile personnel?
Yeah, I think, and I guess endorsement is good, in terms of it creates exposure. It hopefully brings this concept or introduce this concept to more people, or so at least perhaps intrigue more people in some way to attract newcomers to the space. But of course, we are wary of what that might mean. And we always reflect back to what happened with the crypto space with institutionalization comes with more regulation, and that can mean really different things. And sometimes I think a common sort of wicked problem, I guess, or sort of a dilemma in the crypto space is to what extent you have decentralization and then you have regulation. I guess that can also be sort of applied to the NFT space. But I guess the exciting thing is, if we toss out all that, big theory and big argument. If I, on a micro level, if I'm an NFT holder and knowing that someone I perhaps look up to or someone who's notable, share a similar sort of taste or appreciation with me in terms of the NFT project that I hold, that definitely gives me a sort of a sense of euphoria or a dopamine hit in the most simpler way. But I really think we can be a bit cautious there of what that actually means, because endorsement sometimes comes with a different sort of can of worm, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Louisa. Well, yep. Go ahead, Leonard.
I think for me, right, how I see celebrity endorsements in the NFT scene, it's actually helped driving a lot of crypto adoption. So funny story, right? One that just pops into mind when we talk about this is that I have a friend who, she's always been traditional and stuff like that. She doesn't know anything about cryptocurrency. She's not very close to tech as well. And one day she suddenly comes to me, right? And she's like, hey, can I buy some Ethereum from you? And then I'm just sitting down there, thinking to myself, you never expressed any interest in cryptocurrencies. So why are you suddenly buying Ethereum out of nowhere? And then she's like, oh, JJ Lin is dropping an NFT, so I'm gonna buy that. So for me, right, because Louisa and I, and you as well, right, I'm not really too sure how you guys have at least moved into the space, how you have progressed in it. But personally, being someone who's on I would say traditional crypto, it took me a while to wrap my mind around the collection of NFTs and how this works, because I've always been DeFi, tokenomics and things like that. So to me, those things they make sense, right? So for me, right, the day that I really understood how NFTs was bringing adoption and driving like mainstream to like move into the space, right, was that day when she randomly asked me to buy ETH because a pop star was dropping their own NFTs. So for me, right, then I realized that, tokenomics, like DeFi, these things are not really very easily understood by like just the layman out there on the street at that point of time. But if you put a piece of art on like the blockchain and then you put it out there, it's something that they can see. Like you can't see your tokens, like you can only see the number, but at least when it's an art piece, right, you can actually see something. So I feel that like with the celebrities moving into crypto itself, into like NFTs itself, it brings a lot of credibility to the ecosystem in a way that like DeFi and all the other like layer one projects previously who have been trying their best to market never could. So that's what I see, and that's how I feel that it's been like positively impacting the ecosystem as a whole.
I think it definitely brings the eyeballs, right? Speaking of celebrities, JJ Lin, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was news of Jay Chou's NFT collection being, there was a phishing attack basically on his collection. So that caught my parents' eyes, right? And then they were like, oh, hey, this could be a dangerous place, which brings me to my next question. Addressing skeptics, addressing concerned viewers out there. What do you think, I guess, could be a layer of security that players within the space or people who kind of develop some of these projects can put into place to help to provide some level of comfort or security for participants? Louisa?
Yeah, I think this somehow sort of ties into when we talk about the onboarding experience earlier, and that is it sort of vary depending on your level of knowledge. It kind of impacts on the level of due diligence you do personally. But the great thing is with the internet, there are more and more resources out there for free that sort of hints at possible best practices on what people can do when they purchase their NFT project. The good thing is we do have sort of dominant platforms, but it's the individual collection that perhaps need a bit more probing into. So Nansen Tools is one of the ways users can actually conduct due diligence, because some of the things you can see is, okay, who are the buyers actually go investing into the project? Are there any notable buyer that can perhaps add sort of a sense of confidence when you're actually making a decision to invest in a piece? You could also look at, on Etherscan, what that transaction activity actually looks like. So that could be a way of probing into deeper on, okay, who are actually buying, or were these actually given out for free? So that might actually add peace of mind. When I first entered the space and bought my first one tip that a friend shared with me that I thought was really, really useful was going on to their Twitter account, the project's Twitter account, just to get a sense of how organic the community is, same as their Discord account. Are there genuine people in there actually, sharing knowledge, chatting, or building connection, or is it filled with bots? Because these days they can be quite deceptive. So those are some quick rules that I use personally. But I think sometimes the fun of it is when you see a project that's being hyped and you get really, really excited and you speak to your own peers in real life, or it could be online, and you perhaps bounce off one another. And hopefully, like for me, I might use some of my friends as like litmus tests where, I might be super enthusiastic about something and might be blindsided, and, they will share with me their feedback. And I guess that process of bouncing ideas of one another actually helps to strengthen that due diligence process.
Nice. I actually do have a question from the audience right now, which is a perfect segue. With 15 minutes left on the clock, I'm going to just divert our time to answering all of our audience questions. So Leonard, one of the attendees are asking, do artists have any sort of copyright over stolen art that has been converted to NFT? Or I guess, broadly speaking, do artists have any sort of copyright at all over any of the art that they own?
I think at this point of time, right, that's one of the parts that people within the NFT space are trying to bridge it. I believe like on OpenSea, there are algorithms to kind of like track to see whether there are duplicates of like a certain like digital art and JPEG that has been like submitted to be created into an NFT. So that is one. But honestly, when we talk about like the minting of NFTs and like these kind of things, it is still an industry that many of the IP experts are still trying to debate at this point of time. So I would say that this question probably will only be able to answer like perhaps in a year or two when the industry becomes a lot more, in a sense, advanced when it comes to these kind of things.
Okay. And there's another question for you, Louisa, saying about an article stating that the value of ETH is inversely proportionate to that of NFTs. Does data support that?
We're actually quite familiar with that data because we actually reported on this twice. We did a research article when we first launched the index, and we also just recently did a quarterly report using our index. So it really depends on whether or not the NFT is priced in Ethereum or in US dollar. What we found when we did a correlation test using the first quarter of 2022 data using the indexes is when NFT are actually priced in Ethereum, they have little correlation to what the broad market is doing and also what the cryptocurrency market is doing. The sort of disclaimer we have here is it's only a 90-day period that we observe this data. We do intend to sort of track this continuously as we go forward, and perhaps with more data that trend might change, but so far it does support it.
I also want to circle back to the discussion we just had earlier, Leonard, and I pose this question to you because it has to do with ownership, copyright, and various other things. The question is, NFT solves ownership, but how do you see the crypto world solving the problem of usage? And the example that was given is that I can always screenshot, for example, a BAYC NFT and use it on my socials, or I can potentially print them out and sell a T-shirt with a BAYC image that doesn't belong to me.
That's definitely like something that you would be able to do. But I would say that like even if you were to like take a screenshot of the BA York, like Bored Ape Yacht Club and put it as your profile pic, I would say honestly, like the biggest value, right, for owning like a BAYC is that you actually get access to all the events, all the special events that they've been hosting, all the networking things that you can actually like get to meet other people who own the BAYC. And the fact remains is that BAYC itself is already such an exclusive club, right? So the kind of people who are within it are of a certain caliber. No matter how much you try to steal that like JPEG, you put it on like your T-shirt and stuff like that, those people who own it will know that you don't really own it because each BAYC, right, is just so exclusive, right, that the owners in each country, they kind of already know each other. So for them, right, like, if you were to take like the JPEG of BAYC, create a like T-shirt, start selling it, like it's going to be small money. Like I really don't think the owner is really going to care that much considering that they are rich enough to afford something that was already worth like $500,000. So there's that. When it comes to the other NFT projects, right, the smaller ones, I would say that yes, that would be something that they would be more concerned about. But as of now, right, it's actually very closely linked to the IP like question that you posed to me earlier on. It's at this point of time really too difficult to track, especially when like they kind of take it from the offline world and transform it into something that is physical and tangible asset. So unlike that, you can't really use an algorithm to kind of track like, who has printed like a photo of like this particular like NFTs and things like that. So I would say that if anyone is able to solve this problem within like the crypto and NFT industry at this point of time, right, their solution would come very, very highly, like it'll be in high demand, I would say.
I could add to that. I'm not sure, but I agree with what Leonard say. But I think what's interesting is this phenomenon is not just exclusive to the NFT space. I mean, you see that with luxury good, such as your high street labels, but they've never really gone out there to have sort of a war against all this counterfeit. In fact, some might argue that the counterfeit actually helps to strengthen the real deal. But I guess as the broader NFT community, you would like to, well, at least for me, I would like to sort of believe that there's some kind of social etiquette around what is acceptable norm and what isn't when it comes to how people should use the art they own or they create. But yeah, it just sort of thought that it's interesting parallel that it's not unique to the NFT space.
Nice. What then do you think, and this is actually a question from one of our viewers as well, and I think we've various ones have answered in drips and drabs, but on a more targeted, kind of way, what makes an NFT valuable? So like we mentioned, Bored Ape Yacht Club, and of course there's CryptoPunks, each valued at kind of 3-digit ETH price tags. So that would be about millions of US dollars, right? What aspects do you think contribute to that insanely high value for each of these NFTs?
I think like what Leonard mentioned earlier was it's the value that it creates for its holder, the access and the membership. I guess BAYC, it's very unique in the sense that the holder is almost guaranteed a future return through future launch of their project, and then now ApeCoin, you have MAYC and then ApeCoin, but like what Leonard said, is that social capital in some way. It's, if we think about it in a traditional parallel, I guess in the case of Singapore, why some people will want to have access and membership to certain country club, because you are sort of in a circle of different kind of social capital, and that perhaps give you access to opportunity, knowledge, information, alpha. So those are some value that's being generated through holding this NFT. But in a more direct manner, I guess with BAYC, we see the case with ApeCoin, and then now the promise of digital land in the metaverse. But I guess, just to add in terms of what really value, I think it just depends on what people think in the perceived value, and whether or not the price they pay and the value that derives from it, is it worthwhile, I guess. It's really hard to say, is there a definitive way to say what NFT is valuable and what's not, because it's supply and demand. It's and it's very subjective on what we all think is valuable. And with NFT space, it's a new market. It's a emerging market, and a lot of time we're in this price discovery space because everything is so new. There really isn't a set definition on what is or is not.
I think the perceived value aspect of things, right, is something that really resonates, because BAYC kind of like really, really took off, right? Like when so many celebrities start buying into it, and then people are like, oh, like, I want to be associated with these guys, I want to own one of these as well. And then the price just like suddenly shot through the roof, right? So that's that kind of thing. I think that, of course, when it comes to the art pieces, right, like having nice art definitely works for like all of these NFTs, because they are something that can be seen, they're something that can be shown off, unlike your like traditional like crypto tokens. Like, what are you going to show them, right? Like, I've got like 10,000 like Dogecoin and stuff like that, so it doesn't really work out as well as like, if you show like your NFT of your Bored Ape, and then you can talk about like the different things within it, like all the different traits. I would say that the rarity table, right, when it comes to like determining the traits for like a particular NFT, a very well designed rarity table will probably see the project do a lot better. Actually wanted to get your view on this from Nansen, to see whether you guys have done some, collected any data with regards to how rarity tables actually affect the price of these NFTs.
Yeah, we actually have a price estimator feature on Nansen that actually takes into consideration price action of a piece within a collection and what the rarity looks like. And from there, actually projecting what the price might be like and with what sort of confidence. But yes, I agree with what Leonard mentioned. Rarity plays quite a bit of importance in terms of the value of a piece within a collection. But what's interesting is when we talk about valuation in relation to rarity here, we have two kinds, right? One is in general as a whole of what the entire collection might be perceived as in terms of market cap. And within the collection, you have this huge distribution in terms of what is being sold at the floor price and, you know, the sort of most rare pieces and what they're being transacted for. So when we talk about, going back to that perceived value, it might be a collection that, you know, is, you know, mid-range value, mid-range project. It's not a blue chip, but within that collection, you might actually, you know, score the really, really one of one, a really rare one, which you might actually put more emphasis on the perceived value.
Thank you both. And, you know, really, where did the time go? I do believe we only have one final question to go. We're going to go with this one. A question from one of our viewers asking, you know, about why some NFT values drop immediately after whitelist mint. For example, you know, an NFT whitelist mints for 0.04 ETH, and then the second-hand market drops to 0.02 ETH. So the question is, why does this happen? And if I buy a whitelist mint, you know, for example, 0.04 ETH, that person would never sell it immediately at 0.02 ETH at a loss.
Leonard, would you want to answer this?
Yeah. I think in some of these cases, right, for the people who are looking to like just sell like immediately after they've gotten it, perhaps like they've done like the NFT review already and they realize that the trades that they have gotten are not, in a sense, particularly favorable to them at that point. So for all of these NFT flippers, they rather just like, you know, sell this as soon as possible, like get back some of the capital and then go into like a different project and then start trying to figure out how they can flip again. So that's one reason. I think another instance I've actually seen, right, was that the community was kind of not, or at least like there were some issues that the community brought up to the project teams, which were not very well handled. And as such, there are a couple of like NFT alpha groups out there who do have the buying power to kind of sweep up a whole entire project. And in some instances, they would purposely drive down the floor price below the mint price. And this is doing so just solely for the reason of spiking like the project team and things like that. So there are instances where these kind of things do happen. And honestly, they're still, I would say that they are not uncommon at this point of time. Yeah. So those are just two of the things that I can think of at the top of my head at this point of time.
Thank you, Leonard. Yeah, actually, I was going to say that, you know, we are coming to the end of the session right now. Any final thoughts from the both of you? Ladies first.
I was just going to quickly add to Leonard. I think a lot of time with, you know, with regards to valuation, perceived value, why a price might drop or go up, it's really context dependent. Like we, you know, sort of mentioned throughout this conversation, this discussion is that it's still a very young market. It's, you know, it's emerging. That's the exciting part. But then it sort of brings to the importance of, you know, doing sufficient due diligence, making sure that users actually are comfortable with the risk they're going in, comfortable in the vision of the project that they're investing in, what the project is, you know, representing. So those are all really, really important things to consider before they actually invest, rather than, you know, speculating. So it's always important to sort of balance that risk.
I think on my end, just want to remind the crypto community to do your own research. And for those of you guys who are into this market, remember that admins will never DM you first.
Very, very good advice. Thank you so much once again to both of you. That's all we have time for today. This is Ahead of the Curve. Thank you, Louisa. Thank you, Leonard, for joining us and just being
Thank
the
you.
absolute best, this past hour. Can't wait to catch up with you both again. So yeah, and to the rest of the viewers, we'll see you again next month, and be kind to one another. Take care.